Welcome everybody to the SoxProspects.com podcast, the web's #1 source for information on the Boston Red Sox from top to bottom, from Fort Myers to Worcester, across the Pike to Fenway, and all stops in between. Thank you all for listening. My name is Chris Hatfield. I'm the executive editor of Sox Prospects, joined as always by our director of scouting, Ian Kundle. Ian, we have white smoke coming out the chimney at Fenway Park. There is a new chief baseball officer. It's a Pope reference. Maybe you're not a Catholic Church guy. You all can't see the look of confusion that got. But anyway.
No, I got the CBO reference.
Okay.
But
I would have bad one.
Yeah, I would have thought Red Smoke would have been better because Red Sox, but you can't win them all. So, yeah.
Fair enough. I tried. At any rate. All right. Well, we've got a new CBO. We've got to get on the horn to talk about it. We've had a few days to digest, to think it over, to absorb. I've been digesting as much prior Craig Breslow content as possible. He's done a fair number of podcasts in the past few years, so I listened back to him. Obviously a smart dude. We're going to talk about that. First chief baseball officer with a SoxProspects.com player page, as I tweeted. Former pitcher with the Red Sox. We'll talk about everything Craig Breslow on this episode, and a brief update on Winter League type stuff. But really, the Breslow discourse is kind of the important thing here, and so we'll talk about that. Of course, before we dive in, if you want to support the show, you can rate and review us on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is that you listen. You can support us on patreon.com/SoxProspects. Pledge a certain amount per episode, get some neat perks. And you can send your emails to podcast@SoxProspects.com because we want to talk about what you want to hear about. That's about it. Let's get right to it, Ian. I'm trying to make the intro stuff quicker these days. Jump right into the meat of the show. Craig Breslow, let's start here. Your 10,000-foot thoughts. How are you feeling a few days after the announcement on the hire of Craig Breslow as the chief baseball officer for the Boston Red Sox?
I think as the search progressed, it became pretty clear it was going to be him, I feel like. And
at what point did you think that? I'm curious as you say that.
I think pretty early on when so many people said no, and then it was like it was basically him, Thad Levine, Neil Huntington, and then the internal
guys.
Yeah. But I think, to me, I thought it was going to come down to him or Eddie Romero.
Yeah, that's where I was too.
In the end, it ended up, what was it? It was him, Thad Levine, or Neil Huntington.
Yeah, it was weird. Yeah, and we can talk about the fact that none of the internal candidates
I think that
the first round.
With Breslow, I understand there are some concerns about his inexperience, as he's never been a GM. And, I think you could make a case he has less qualifications for the top job just in terms of experience than Chaim Bloom did, because he's only been in a front office since 2019, I think.
Yeah, he was playing in 2018. And in fact, as I tweeted, his final game for AAA Buffalo in the Jays system, his catcher was Reese McGuire.
Oh, wow. That's actually pretty fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that he has a very good background of what I would want in place for someone in that job, in the sense that I think having playing experience is pretty important. And we've seen, I think and a lot of people have mentioned this, but the way the Rangers have run it this year with Chris Young, I think that having someone who has that experience, knows what it's like to be in a pennant race, in the sense of like being in that clubhouse. And I think and it's been reported and we've known about it there was definitely a disconnect between the clubhouse and the front office during Chaim Bloom's tenure.
Okay. Cause I'm making sure you're talking about the Red Sox and not the Rangers.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. And I think that, having someone who has been in that clubhouse and has kind of has a little bit of a sense of urgency is definitely needed, because I do think the last couple of years there's been a little bit too much of like sitting on the fence or playing the middle when you got to pick a direction. And I think that that's something that Breslow would do, is he would, I think he'll have a good feel for, we need to go in here, or it's time to sell and, get out while we're ahead, get some value for our assets. But I think the most intriguing thing to me about him is that it's that he has that background, but he also has a really strong analytical background. Yeah. And I also think that he's going to have some he's clearly has done some scouting too. And I think that he's worn a lot of hats, even though he hasn't been in a front office for very long. I think it's talked a lot about how, he was involved with drafts, player acquisitions. Obviously, he was the director. What was his official title? Director of development.
Well, so his initial title when they first hired him was some random
special
front
assistant
office
to
front office jack of Swiss Army knife
a
guy
job.
basically.
It's a title they make up to get him in the front office.
Exactly. And we can talk a little bit about, because there was a good anecdote that came out. I think it was Chad Jennings who wrote about it in his first year on the job on a presentation he gave. But after that, he became the director of pitching or something to that effect. And then they added an assistant GM to his title, I think, in the last year or two.
Yeah. But I think that having someone who has worked in a variety of different roles, has that playing experience, it checks a lot of boxes of what I would want for someone in charge. And going back to the Rangers, I mean, there is a precedent of that working. And I think that for where this team is at on the progress meter, or, the way they're trending, I think they need someone to come in who's decisive, willing to make that, that aggressive move to get them over the top, because they have a lot of assets right now. They have a good major league lineup. The pitching staff needs a lot of work. And if you had to tell me who would you trust to rebuild a pitching staff, I think someone with Breslow's background would be near the top of that list, just given what we've seen. What he's done with the Cubs pitching staff, in conjunction, obviously, with their development system and other front office people. But I think that is he checks a lot of boxes in that regard. I think the one concern, obviously, for me would be that he doesn't have the experience running in the head job.
That's the major con right there. Yep.
I do think it is interesting that was one of the biggest knocks against Chaim Bloom, and then they went and just did the exact same thing again. But I also think that if I would guess, if you had to give Sam Kennedy some truth serum and asked him, did the process play out like you expected, he would say no. I have a feeling they thought they would get a bigger fish, and pretty clearly they learned that none of those people were actually interested, and that's when they pivoted. But
what's a bigger fish, I think, is part of it, right? Because is Sam Fuld a bigger fish?
No, I wasn't thinking Sam Fuld.
I know you weren't, but I'm just saying,
I was thinking they thought they would get someone like Derek Falvey, John Daniels, like an established MLB GM.
I don't agree with that.
I think that, and with Breslow as the two, was if you asked what their ideal game plan would be something like that.
Yeah,
but obviously that's not how it played out. So.
I don't disagree with your bigger point that maybe it didn't play out the way that they thought it might. I mean, when you talk like a Falvey or a John Daniels, like, I don't think they assumed they were going to get a person like that.
No, but I just don't think they assumed they were going to get no's.
I think that's what was different. And I think
the point is, almost all the people who said no were, except for Gomes and Fuld, if he was even asked, which I'm not clear about. Mm-hmm. But
if they bothered, right?
Yeah. Were
I think it was reported that he said no.
I don't think it was.
Okay, maybe not. Okay. Anyway.
But I think it was more that you look at the list of people who said no, they were targeting big fish there. Like, wasn't it like Chris Antonelli?
Well, that's the report. The report is that they did start with the bigger folks, like the Falveys of the world. But I think it was also just like, you can't.
But I think
you can't get told yes if you don't ask.
No, but when you combine that with what Sam Kennedy said at his press conference, I don't think that he thought that they would be getting no's from that many people.
Yeah, but the reporting is that this is like every team thinks there's going to be more interest in their job than there is. Right?
Yeah, but like,
so on the one hand, there's 30 of these jobs, and you want to be the head of the Red Sox front office more than you want to be the head of like the Oakland A's front office, right? Because you've got way more to work.
Yeah, you have way more resources,
historical franchise, great fan base, but at the same time, like, it's not like I mentioned last episode, it's not like you get an infinite number of opportunities at a front job either. And if you want to make sure that your first shot is somewhere you want to be.
Well, no, but I'm not talking about someone who it's their first shot.
No. Okay, well then maybe not your first shot. Talking about what may be your last shot. Put it that way.
You're talking about established people in smaller markets, or who had a big job and haven't recently, and they all were like, "Nah, we're good." For whatever reason, whether it be family in some situations, which obviously perfectly legit, or whether it be the other factors that were discussed, about the people already in place, having a lot of input, things like that. And I just think that and this is my opinion, I think that if you asked them, they would have initially told you that they thought it would play out differently. But I think that they also, once they got Breslow in the room, I'm going to guess he's a very good interview. I'm just going to throw that out there. Someone who would go Yale with that background. Sure. I'm going to guess he probably blew their socks off, and doesn't help or doesn't hurt either that he was endorsed by Theo Epstein. And I think that
clearly,
that having Theo on your side still carries a lot of weight around here. So I think that was the big feather in his cap when it came to ultimately deciding to go with him, which based on everything we've read, and it seems like it was the choice that made the most sense at the end.
It seems clear that Breslow had a lot of leverage.
Oh yeah, he had a ton of leverage.
My guess is that they got him in the room, interviewed him, and there was a report that he's the only one that got a second round interview. The reporting is that when they got through the first round, the guys they were still considering were Breslow, Thad Levine, and Neil Huntington, which there's more to unpack from that. But it's interesting to me that then Breslow talked with John Henry. You could understand why John Henry would be very talk with Craig Breslow and be blown away. Never mind. There's the Theo connection, right? Which you could see John Henry just being Theo being the one, not the one that got away, but the your ex who you're still in love with kind of situation almost, right? But Breslow getting that interview with Henry, you could see how Henry, being a guy who made his money on analytics, basically, just being blown away by him. And I think it was clear that the only way it made sense to hire Breslow, notwithstanding the major negative in his resume, which is it's not lack of head of a front office experience, it's lack of front office experience. Full stop. It's 2019 to present. That's great. He's going to be working ahead of guys who were in the Red Sox front office when he was a player.
Couldn't it have been before he even started playing?
No, because he was drafted in 2002.
Was he? I thought.
Yeah, he's been in the game for a while, or not? Was it 2? Yeah, I think it was 2. He's been in the game for a while. He played for a long time.
He was drafted in 2000. No, sorry. What I meant to say was when he made his MLB debut. Before he made his MLB debut.
I mean, guys wouldn't have been in director roles.
Right, that's right.
Eddie Romero might have been an intern or something.
Or like Brian O'Halloran, I think would have been already with the org.
But they're interns.
I just think that's kind of interesting.
It's interesting, but it's and someone else pointed out, we actually got an email from one of our patron supporters who mentioned the question is, why is no one talking about it? And I think it's because it's not that big a deal, but the fact that Breslow and Cora played together in that's 7 or 06.
I think
who
can't remember. Well, it's also someone wrote about it. I think it might have been John McCaffrey.
Yeah.
They weren't. They played together for half a season. It wasn't like they were super tight and
Put it this way,
together.
if you think about what you were doing in 2006, right? So I was a senior in college.
That's someone you knew for 6 months, and
that's no, it's someone who I had a class with.
Yeah.
Right. And now I'm their boss. Okay, cool. They went to the same school I did. Great. Or they played on the same team I did. Great. I don't think that matters. I don't think that's a big deal. He played with a lot of guys that year, including AAA and the majors, right? And AA. But yeah, it's interesting. But anyway, the point that I was trying to get to is, it seems clear to me that he clearly wasn't coming over without getting a promotion. If he would have taken the number 2 job, you risk losing him in a couple of years, because with the way his star was rising so quickly, even if maybe he wasn't the perfect amount of experience now, he was going to have that in a couple of years if he got a number 2 job and was going to get another job, and you were going to have to let him go because you let him interview.
Well, and it's also, if you bring in someone above him, you're not going to fire that person in the next
just to promote him. Right. Yeah. That's so it's if you wanted to bring Breslow over, it looks like it became pretty clear pretty quickly that it was going to have to be in the number 1 chair.
Well, and it's funny because I think a lot has been made about titles, when I think people are starting to realize with this process and how it's played out is a lot of front office titles are more about protecting yourself from them getting poached.
Oh, well, we talked about that in day one.
With Breslow, it seems like he's the type of mind that you want in your organization. And I'm willing to take that risk if I'm the Red Sox, that he might take him a little bit of time to grow into the job in order to get him in there in the building and for the long haul. Yeah. And I think that's kind of the calculus they made. And I can't say I disagree with it. I think it was in the end of the day, the right move is getting him in some capacity. And
And it's interesting that, look at the 3 guys that were their last 3 candidates. It's Huntington, who's the established, has been in the number 1 chair before guy, for better or worse, honestly. I don't know that his track record's that great, if I'm being honest.
If that had happened, oh boy, that would
that would have been
the reaction of that would have been very interesting.
Thad Levine is the guy who's had the experience in the number 2 chair.
Yeah.
Right. He's Thad Levine.
But it's interesting. He's been in that position for a while, and he's interviewed for several other jobs and never gotten them.
Well, no, but the thing is, he was going to get the Philly job until he pulled himself out.
Remember? Oh, was that the case? Okay,
he pulled himself out of that because he didn't. I don't know if it was a family thing or what, but the reporting is that the Phillies were going to give him the job Dombrowski got until Levine pulled himself out of the running.
Got it. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So,
because
who knows why?
Yeah. In this one, it sounds like the Red Sox told him that he was out of the running. Basically, it wasn't Levine?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, it was. I mean, it was clear that. That's what I'm wondering about. Like the last 3 guys they were considering. Like the reporting is not that all 3 of them got second round interviews. In fact, the report was that Breslow was.
I think he's the only one who got a second round interview, right?
Yeah, and the thing with like none of the internal guys getting that far, I wonder how much of that is like we know your background.
We
know Eddie Romero's resume. Like either we're hiring you or we're not. And it's like. It doesn't mean that necessarily that they liked Huntington and Levine and Breslow all better than their internal candidates. Those were the guys they were still considering. I think there's a difference there. It is interesting that, it doesn't seem like they were close to pulling the trigger on any of their internal guys.
No,
I don't know what that means. Maybe it doesn't mean anything. But as far as leverage, the other thing that's really interesting to me is apparently before Breslow joined the Cubs, he was very meticulous, perhaps being the word, perhaps not, about what his role was and the title was and job responsibilities were before he came in. And it seems here, I found it very intriguing that the club is going to give him the discretion whether or not he wants to hire a GM. He's getting the chief baseball officer title again.
Yeah, I thought that was funny. I thought they were going to retire it too. But I guess what else can you call that role?
Like, I mean, you'd be calling it the president of baseball operations instead, and it means the same thing.
Right.
And it's just making it conform with what every other team calls it, basically.
Fair. Well, does every other team? I don't think every other team calls it.
Almost every other team
does it really? Okay.
I guess Falvey, because remember when we asked Heim about it, like Falvey was CBO for a while and they changed his title.
Right.
But at any rate, they're giving Breslow the discretion of whether or not to hire a second in command. And apparently he's definitely not going to do it right away because
well, didn't they say it could play out over a year? Like it might not be until next offseason.
Sure. Yeah. It might be later this offseason. Maybe it's next. Yeah. But it's like, it makes sense because like he's coming in. He's basically like they're not doing the press conference until after the World or November.
No, it's
the
next
2nd.
Thursday.
It's next Thursday, which is an off day.
Yeah.
Probably for the World Series.
Yeah. Because the last 2 games are game 3 and 4, or the last 2 days are the 3rd and the 4th. So it's in between games 5 and 6.
Yeah. So it makes sense that like you have to do it on an off day, I think. Because MLB doesn't want you doing it on a day with Series game.
It's good they got it done because the GM meetings are like the weekend after.
Well, and that's the point I was about to make is he's got like 4 days after that before the GM meeting.
Yeah, and then there's only like 2 weeks until there's only 2 weeks until the Rule 5 deadline. After that, like he's gonna have to hit the ground running when he comes.
Yeah, and I think they know that, and I think that's why they're like, look, you've got Eddie Romero, Raquel Ferreira, Mike Grootman, Brian O'Halloran's still here.
Yeah,
Ben Crockett. And the rest of this front office in place.
Yeah.
You don't have 18 other positions you need to interview for. Like you've got support.
Well, and I think that is the big difference because you look at some of the other teams, like there's a bunch of front offices that don't have, like they're missing a bunch of guys from those roles because either they've been fired or they just haven't hired them yet.
People.
Yeah. People. Yes. Correct. Yeah. Or like the Mets, for example, they have several openings they need to fill in like those regards. Like, so it is good that
new manager.
That he can that he can come in, the infrastructure is in place, and now it's going to be, we'll see if they bring in anyone else from outside the organization, but he can hit the ground running into what we've talked about is obviously a pivotal offseason for the Red Sox.
One note, I know that like Jared Banner works with the Cubs, and like someone was tweeting at like everyone they could find, like, oh, I bet you he's going to bring Jared Banner. Like, it remains to be seen whether he's going to be allowed to bring anyone from the Cubs, because that could be one of the like conditions of them letting him go. Is that like the same thing that Bloom had, that like you can't bring anyone with you for 2 years or something?
Yeah. That's. I wonder though if that was a lot of that was because it was like AL East to AL East.
It could be. Yeah, I mean that's probably a big piece of it. Because then if you think about the fact that like Mike Hazen brought Amiel with him,
right,
and didn't he bring someone else? I thought he brought one other person.
He brought their scout in Asia. No, I know
Shipley.
who it is. No. It is Shipley, isn't it?
Shipley? You mean
I'm
the
almost
international
positive.
guy?
Craig
The Pacific
Shipley?
guy? Did Shipley go with him? Yeah, maybe Ship went with him. Yeah, maybe. But at any rate, like,
Yeah.
it's not unprecedented for guys to go with him. So we'll see if they bring anyone. But like, he's not going to bring Banner for like the exact same position.
Oh, no. Shipley he is in Arizona, but he was actually hired in 2012.
Okay.
He was hired long before there. There was someone
else.
So
he might have been Josh Byrne. Josh Burns.
Yeah, he's been in there since 2012. There was someone else. I'm going to look right now while you talk.
Yeah. But at any rate, yeah. So we'll see who he brings with him. But I'm curious, and we were talking a little bit about this. I'm very curious what he does with that front office, because the Red Sox were very adamant that they saw the fact that this entire front office was in place and the coaching staff, or at least the head coach, head coach, was in place.
It's Allard Baird.
Did Baird go with Hazy?
Yeah, Allard Baird is there. So is Jason McLeod.
McLeod came from the Cubs.
McLeod came from the Cubs via the Red Sox. But no, it's Allard Baird was who we were thinking of, because he's there too.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't realize Baird went. Do we know Baird went with them?
I'll look right now.
Yeah. Interesting. At any rate, not really a big huge deal, but like, yeah.
No, he was hired with the Mets. He went from the Mets there.
I was going to say, I didn't think you were right with them. Yeah. So, anyway, whatever.
Yeah,
fine.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter.
I think it's someone who's since like, I wonder if it was Porter. I think it might have been Porter. And then Porter went over to the Mets.
No, he went to the Cubs first. Porter was with the Cubs.
Was he? Anyway, okay, whatever. We're getting off on a tangent.
He went to the Cubs first, and then Arizona from 16 to 2020.
Oh, okay, all right.
And then
so maybe they brought Porter in from the Cubs is what I'm thinking of. That's what it was. Okay, glad we pinned that down. Listening to Craig Breslow turning the page and continuing some progress here. I highly recommend, at least until one of your favorite podcasts gets Breslow on, which it seems like he's probably not going to do anything until after he's introduced, or after the GM meetings, probably, because he's got to hit the ground running, like you said. Go listen to Craig Breslow talk. There are podcasts out there that he did, like there's a Cubs one he did last year. He is very clearly a smart dude. And it's interesting that the anecdote I was referring to is that apparently in his first year on the job with the Cubs, he came in and gave a presentation about some research he had been doing, and it apparently went horribly. He just talked way over the heads of everyone in the room, and Jed Hoyer sat down with him and told him, like, you've got to kind of dumb it down, maybe not being the right term, but you've got to consider who you're talking to. It's not people who necessarily get analytics. And apparently he came right in, gave the same presentation again, and it was awesome the second time. He's clearly a very, very smart guy. He is clearly capable of picking things up very quickly. It seems very likely that whatever areas he does not have sufficient experience in, he will pick those up quickly or learn to rely on other people for them. That said, it is very interesting, Ian, that there was already in one of the reports out there that at least someone in the front office expressed concern that he was another analytics guy.
Yeah.
Which
not great,
guys. And it's, look, I mean, what I'll say is this: to the extent that the Red Sox front office is one right now, that maybe not every single person in it is rowing in the same direction and completely on board. He needs to fix that quick.
Yeah.
That's going to be on him to get that going really quick. And there's ways you do that, right? There's ways you include people. It's a team leadership thing. And he's going to have to pick that up quick. And that's any job, even if he came in with everyone like super on board with, heck yeah, Craig Breslow. Learning how to lead the room is something he's going to have to pick up quickly. And it's something that you wonder about, fair or not. It seems like at the end, Chaim Bloom didn't have everyone rowing the same direction.
Well, and I think that's what I was going to say is I think that what we saw under Chaim Bloom, it can be difficult to come into a situation with so many established people who we talked about in one of the previous episodes. They have a lot of guys who've been there 10, 15 guys and gals who've been there 10, 15 plus years. And it can be hard, especially when you're competing for the same job for someone from outside the organization to get that job ahead of you and to come in and kind of, get everything, as you said, rowing in the right direction. But I think
let me just interject real quick. I want to make sure it's clear that I understand what you're saying. You are not implying that anyone who is interviewing for the job is who's saying anything.
No.
I know you mean that, but I want to make sure that's clear.
But I think that's going to be an important part of his role is going to be, working with the people already there and finding that common ground, and so they can, put out the best possible product on the field.
Exactly.
Because I do think that's something, obviously, that High and Bloom, there were definitely some conflict or something going on within the groups there.
Based on the reporting, it seemed pretty clear that there were some
Yeah.
folks who were just
Yeah.
not on the same page as the
Yeah.
head person in charge. I think that's part of why he lost the job.
I agree.
And whether it's his quote unquote fault or not.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's like the manager getting fired because you can't trade all 26 players. Right.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
if there's a disconnect, it's a lot easier to get rid of the one guy. We'll see how Breslow is able to bridge that gap. Another interesting thing is that it seems when you look at like his title, they did not bring Craig Breslow in to fix the pitching. Yes, his background in that area is good.
No, yeah, so you're telling me he's not going to be working with like a low A reliever on their pitch grip?
He's not going to be sitting down with Luis Guerrero in spring training and
he actually
working
might be
on his pitch.
Are you sure? Because Guerrero should have picked a different pitcher.
Okay. But
Luis Guerrero throws really hard. I have a feeling Craig Breslow is going to be a fan.
Yeah, that's true. His background in pitching is good. He's certainly going to come in.
No. Whoa. It's great. Come on. Don't undersell.
Oh, good to have, not good.
Okay. Sorry. I thought you meant
good to have.
Oh, it's just good,
Yeah, it's
just turned
fair.
The Cubs were only like the best minor league system in terms of velocity and second and stuff last year. It's just good,
Yeah. No, he has excellent background in pitching. He's a great pitching mind, but you don't make that guy it's like when Peter Gammons had the tweet earlier this offseason about like the Red Sox are looking at Breslow to bring him in to be their director.
Well, that wasn't even the offseason. That was in like August.
Not the offseason.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was August. Yeah. Whether or not
heck of a connection, by the way. Heck of a connection to throw that name out there.
That's why
he ended up joining the.
That's why he's Peter freaking Gammons.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you don't bring Breslow in to be your chief baseball officer to just focus on making sure you can develop pitching.
If you're in that role, you don't have the time.
No,
like you don't have the time to be meticulously micromanaging every single aspect of the pitching operation. And that's why one of the things that I think I tweeted about that I'm most interested to see is what is he going to do with the pitching apparatus? Because I think they took some really nice steps forward this past year. And obviously they made some changes there already. They brought in a bunch of drive line guys. They've been fully embracing, all the available technology. And I'm interested to see what processes and potentially personnel he brings in to kind of continue to fine tune that operation. Because I think it's been rumored that maybe Andrew Bailey is going to be joining the organization in some capacity. I don't know if that was more just a link.
I think it's just a link. And to be clear, the like Andrew Bailey, it isn't just that they both worked with the Cubs or that they pitched on the same team
with the Giants or something. Now
Bailey was with the Giants as their pitching coach, and I think when Kapler got fired, he's also out. Is I think what happened. Don't quote me on that, but Andrew Bailey is like. Helps run Craig Breslow's charity. Like they are legitimately like super tight.
Yeah.
I would be more surprised than not, honestly, if Bailey doesn't join the organization in some role.
Yeah, that's what I'm kind of thinking.
And that's pure speculation.
Yeah.
Like Bailey's like a Connecticut guy, and like it makes all the sense in the world.
He checks a lot of boxes.
He does. So it would not surprise me to see him come in some capacity, whether it's as the pitching coach, because
that's what I'm saying. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with that development staff. And I think that is the area where he will have the biggest impact, if that makes sense, rather than working specifically with the individual pitchers and things.
And he's going to come in and talk to Sean Haviland and Chris Mears. Right. And if I can make an analogy, because this is what popped into my head, and I'm going to hopefully not lose too many people with this analogy, right? WWE. Okay. Just, I see the look, and it's fair. Recently was sold. Okay. It got sold, and Vince McMahon is no longer like the guy in charge of the company. And basically Ari Emanuel, who's the head of the new entity, pulled Vince McMahon off of like dealing with day-to-day creative decisions on like the on-screen product, because it's not his job to do that anymore. Craig Breslow is not going to be in the trenches with the pitchers. That's the comparison I make in my head of like, you are not the guy in charge of pitching anymore. You have a more important title. Yes, you can to evaluate the program being run by Sean Havlin and Chris Mears. You can evaluate how it's being done. You're not sitting down with individual pitching. And who knows, like you said, they brought in all these driveline guys. They have an apparatus in place. He's just going to see if that's like doing what he wants it to be doing. Maybe he doesn't bring anyone new in. Maybe he's just like, yeah, okay, we're rowing in the right direction here. Try adding X and Y or something. Who knows? But he's not going to be in the trenches with them on a day-to-day. It's going to be a monthly check-in. It's going to be, or something, who knows? But, he's going to be in charge of player acquisition. He's going to be in charge of like, do we have the right number of people in the analytics department? He's going to be in charge of evaluating the scouting department. He's going to be in charge of, we've read about, he was in charge of, leading the recruitment of Jamison Tyon. He was in charge of, or he was part of the draft decisions. He was in the draft room. Like, this is not a guy who was just like sitting at home in Newton.
Well, and I think that's
looking at Rapsodo video.
Well, that's what I was about to say, is I think that him not being in Chicago has kind of, so it can cause some confusion, because it can make it look like, oh, he was in the room with all the big decisions the Cubs were making, from everything we've reported. With the GM, or I don't remember how they have set up there, but the two people ahead of him, basically, he was in that room.
I think, Hoyer's the Hoyer's the president of baseball operations, I think, whatever it's called.
They have two people ahead of him, but he was one of their chief. He was in the room, and I think having that experience being in the room that last season is very important for him.
No question.
For what now that he's with.
Yeah. So it's interesting. The kind of thing that stems out of the leverage he had. And okay, actually here, I've got it right here. It's Jed Hoyer's the president of baseball operations. Carter Hawkins is the GM.
Hawkins was the name I couldn't remember.
Yeah. And then there were two assistant general managers, Ihsan Bokhari and Breslow. And then beneath them, there's a VP of player development, who's Jared Banner, and a vice president of baseball operations, and Greg Davey. And I mean, like, the Banner thing, like, you've still got Ben Crockett there. You've still got Brian Abraham there. Like, the fit would be a little weird, I think, in that particular role.
You'd have to create a new title. You'd have to create a new title to get him back.
And then they've got a few director level people, a couple senior advisors. So this isn't a situation. There's definitely fewer people in those roles, which is interesting. But yeah, I mean, VP of scouting. Oh yeah, Dan Konchurovitz, Brown alum. Let's go. Love it. Anyway, autonomy. We made a lot about there's a full front office. The fact that he has the authority to bring in a number two guy or girl, number two person, number two man or woman. I wonder how much autonomy he's going to have with who else he can bring in, who else maybe he keeps or doesn't keep around. It's not clear how much autonomy prior, or the two, I mean, let's just say the two people, it's Dave Dombrowski and Chaim Bloom had, because the people who left for promotions, right? It was Zach Scott leaving to take over the Mets front. I think he left to be the GM and then became the top guy when the Jared Porter thing happened. Am I remembering that right?
I think so. I think you're right.
Yeah, I think he left to be the GM under Porter, and then he got elevated.
Well, then, like, Banner left to go to the Mets. Steve Saunders went to the Blue Jays, I want
to
say.
Those were older, I thought. Though I thought those preceded Bloom.
They might have. I think those were under Dombrowski. Yeah,
I think those were under Dombrowski.
Just Bloom.
But good examples. Like, there were people who left. It was Mike Hazen, who was the GM under Dombrowski, leaving to become the president of baseball operations in Arizona, right? And taking Emil Sade with him. I wonder how much autonomy he's going to have to mess with that, because we don't really know. We also talked about the kind of senior advisor sort of role, right? Where, Theo Epstein had Bill LaJoy. Dave Dombrowski brought in Frank Wren and Tony La Russa, who were just kind of like his sounding board. Bloom never really had anyone. And in the reporting, I think this was from a Pete Abe article, where he had expressed that he was open to doing it or bringing in someone in that role, but just hadn't. Is that something Breslow does? And frankly, given the experience thing, it sounds like a great idea, right? I wonder how much a Neil Huntington would be interested in that. Probably not, because he's got a role like that right now with Toronto, but like, it's someone like that you can just talk to. And one thing that I found interesting, Ian, is I just listened to Rob Bradford had JP Ricciardi on his podcast, on the Baseball Isn't Boring podcast, talking about the evolution of front offices. And I don't necessarily agree with everything Ricciardi was saying, because there was a certain amount of like, he literally said, I don't care what the cost is to acquire a guy if he's going to make our team better. And it was like hearing Dan Dombrowski talk. It was a very Dombrowski outlook on it, but it was such a 180 from what the pretty clear Chaim Bloom philosophy on acquisition was, of, clearly he cared what he was giving up, right? Like, based on everything that's been reported, it seems very clear that it mattered. And that's one of the problems we have with Dave Dombrowski was you gave up 4 guys when it probably would have only taken 3. And I mean, not that he didn't say no. We know some no's he said, particularly in like the Chris Sale trade, but like, to me, it's finding that happy medium. And how do you do that? And I think you need the sounding board, and you need advisors who you trust, and you need to lean on what the people underneath you are telling you to some degree. But the buck does need to stop with him. So I don't know. I'm curious what autonomy he's going to have to bring in people, or listen to who he wants, or not listen to who he wants, or replace folks. That's going to be interesting. I don't know. I don't know what else you have. There's some people saying that this seems like it's bringing in another Chaim Bloom. I don't think it is. I think you made the key point of having played.
No, I don't see that. I don't think that. I think that's a lazy comparison.
It's very lazy.
The only comparison is that, yes, neither of them has never had the number 1 job. Other than that, like,
and they both are inclined to understand analytics.
And they're both Yale guys, right?
Both Yale guys. They have the same initials, and they're both Jewish.
Yeah.
That's the jokey comparison people were making, right?
That's it's completely
none of that
baseball.
means anything.
No, it's completely different baseball backgrounds, and we don't know. Like, we don't know what Craig Breslow's philosophies are when it comes to team building, when it comes to how he's going to do transaction wise things like that. So yeah,
the opening presser is going to be very interesting. It was too bad that, despite the fact that we took a couple of days to kind of process this before recording, that we haven't had the presser yet.
I know, because it's good. On the next episode, we'll
do it on the next episode. Sure. Yeah. Maybe. I mean, by the way, this is episode 299. So nice. For those wondering, it seems very unlikely we will get Breslow for 300. I know it would have been a nice bookend with having Bloom on for 200. Doesn't seem like that's going to happen.
No,
but we'll see. I'll just put it that way. Maybe we can do the next episode is like 299B, and just keep doing that until we get Breslow for what's technically episode 300.
Well, it'll be a shame when we're on like 299Z and we have to decide what we need to do after that. We can go do like the Microsoft, the Excel way, like Microsoft 299AA.
Turns out he's upset with us for something that was in his scouting report in 2013.
Greg, if you're listening, I had no part of that report, so don't blame me.
Were you with the site yet in 20? Well, because the thing too is, I think when
I wasn't doing the reports then.
Well, and I think his scouting report would have been the 2006 report.
Well, that was definitely not me, because I was still in high school. So
yeah, because I think when they brought him back, he was clearly just a major league guy. And we don't touch guys when they're just major. We don't touch their player pages.
I was still in high school, so it was definitely not me.
Yeah, I think we just left the 06-07 scouting report.
Yeah, I definitely did. Yeah,
because
that looks like a Mike Andrews report.
Yeah, that might have preceded Chris Mellon or myself or anyone else. Yeah, I mean they're like we talked about in the 20th anniversary stuff. The process for that has changed greatly. But yeah, it's kind of interesting to look back on the fact that he had a player page. Yeah, someone asked if he was ranked, and keep in mind when they acquired him, we only went out 40 deep, and so like I think was he a minor league free agent when they acquired him? I think, yeah, when they acquired him the first time. So like a minor league free agent relief pitcher was not a guy who was going to crack the top 40. I mean, it's not a guy who's going to crack the top 60 usually now. So that's why he wasn't ranked. So then by the time he goes up and graduates, like he was never ranked. What else do we have on Breslow? That seems about.
Well, I think one thing I think we just mentioned is obviously we talked a lot about his background with the pitching, and I do think it was pretty interesting in Chad Jennings' article. No, it's not Chad Jennings. It is it is Chad. It's Chad Jennings, Jen McCaffrey, and then the two Cubs athletic writers.
Yeah.
They talked about some of his kind of pitching philosophies, And
Yes.
and I thought that was just pretty interesting that the three that he identifies the pillars of pitching development are velocity, pitching movement / shape, and command. And the process starts with maximizing velocity and goes from there. And if you look at what the Cubs did last season, obviously it translated. I think we mentioned earlier that they were tops in all of minor league baseball in average fastball velocity. They were second in stuff, which is like different teams calculate that different ways.
Sure.
But yeah, it's they have their entire. It's a really they had a really good farm when it came to pitching this year. And I just think it's going to be interesting to see how that blends with kind of the group the Patriots have, especially if you look at the Patriots. Sorry, the Patriots game's going on. The Red Sox have, especially when you look at what the Red Sox have been doing recently in the draft, where I feel like there hasn't been as much of an emphasis placed on velocity. And I'm not saying like maximizing velocity is everyone has to throw 100, but I do think, if you look a lot of the guys they've been taking, especially this year, they're more, guys who are in like the low 90s with good fastball shape. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what happens with that developmentally wise, if there's a shift there, or if it's more just getting the most out of those type of players who maybe are more in the low 90s right now.
Yeah, I think that sounds right. We'll see how that winds up working out, because I don't know that really it diverges all that much from some of the stuff they already do, but it definitely does to a little bit of a degree. So I'm curious where things go from there. We'll see, and we'll have more reaction after the presser. Who knows? Maybe we'll get him on at some point. Would love to talk with Craig Breslow on here. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Moving to some on-field things, Ian. I mean, obviously the World Series is going on. It's the first two games have been fun, I think. I think a lot of people were disappointed that these were the two teams that made it, but
I think the people who were disappointed were those who were just the casual baseball fans, or those who aren't that invested. Because I think what this series has shown, and I think there's actually a couple takeaways for the Red Sox that maybe we'll discuss after the series when we get closer to when the offseason is going to start ramping up.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that it's been a really good platform for a couple of like the future stars, or the stars of this next generation in Major League Baseball. And I'm Corbin Carroll, Gabriel Moreno, and Evan Carter were the kind of the three I was thinking about. Because what the young guys are contributing is really impressive. And I actually think that it further shows the way the games, especially with the way these two teams are playing, is athleticism, home runs, throwing strikes. Like baseball, when you put it down to October, I think it gets pretty simple. And it's just these two teams are just both playing really well right now and maximizing everything they have. And I think that we've seen the first two games have been, first game was super competitive. The second game was, until it kind of got out of hand late. But it's really interesting. And I think that, again, it's showing, though, the impact that youth can have on a playoff race. And it makes me wonder, and it got me thinking about like next year, come the trade deadline, or, that end of season, when you're getting towards the stretch, if the Red Sox are in it, they could have some really interesting wild cards getting ready to come up to the major league level. Like, you could make a case that Meyer, Anthony, and Teal, any and all of them could be knocking on the door.
Evan Carter. I mean, Evan Carter came up in August. Evan Carter
started he started the year, I think, in high A or double A.
Yep. I was about to ask you. I couldn't remember which it was, and I believe it might have been high
A. But it just made me, when I'm watching Evan Carter, just made me think of Roman Anthony. I was like, is there a world where Roman Anthony could do this? And I was like, yeah, probably.
No question.
He started in double A. He started in double A last year.
And that's where, like, I mean, Anthony, Teal, and Meyer are probably all going to start in double A.
And that's the three I was thinking about. Is like, would it surprise you if at least one of those three is in the big leagues by August 1st? No, me neither. I wouldn't
surprise me if all three were.
But I honestly, it's hard to find three roster spots, so that's the hard.
Well, I'm also not predicting it, right? Like,
I would say,
dependent on what happens
to me, it would be better than 50% chance that at least one is in the majors by August 1st, if I had to guess right now.
I think that's a conservative estimate.
Yeah. So, but the fact that we're saying, I'm saying greater than 50% chance they have one guy who's 21 or under, and in double A is in the majors, and you're saying that's conservative. Good sign for the
Yeah.
Red Sox.
Well,
So-
and then you're not forgetting, but that's even not even counting Rafaela and Abreu and.
Well, no, because I'm not
Who've
considering
been up.
anyone who's been up, right? Exactly.
Well, that's what, but I'm saying like those are guys that might start the year in AAA.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
We're gonna
not that we're saying they both will or anything. But like Rafaela certainly will.
We probably are going to have a whole episode discussing Abreu versus Rafaela because it's
one.
Well, yeah, fair. It's a long off season. Hopefully they do stuff. But I'm kidding. But the Red Sox are in a really interesting position when it comes to with their prospects. And I think my point was just, they have guys who could make an impact like we're seeing from the young guys in this series pretty soon. And that's why I think that it's so important that, and if you notice, all the guys we're talking about are on the offensive side of the ball. They need to go out and get pitching this offseason.
I was just thinking the same thing because that's the other lesson when you look at like Tech. Yeah, granted, game one not necessarily being a pitching duel, but like
game one was a pitching
done.
Oh well, it wasn't a pitching duel, but it
wasn't like it was a 2-0 final, right? Is what I'm saying. Or
like Merrill Kelly in game two, 7 innings
fair.
from a guy who came over from Korea. Like,
well, yeah, but I'm saying like look at what like Gallen and Eovaldi have done for these teams. Maybe not in the in the playoffs. It's more Eovaldi, but like
Gallen's been terrible in the playoffs. But yeah,
he's not been good in the playoffs. But during the season, he was money for them.
Yeah.
Right. Like having those horses is like kind of important.
Well, I mean, and that's what you see.
They don't have that right
when
now.
You looked at the final four teams. Astros, what can they run out? Top of the rotation: Framber Valdez, Justin Verlander.
Mm-hmm.
Phillies, obviously Zach Wheeler, Aaron Nola.
Yep.
Diamondbacks,
Gallen,
Kelly, and then Texas, Jordan Montgomery, Max Scherzer,
Nasty Nate,
and Nate Eovaldi. All of those teams have at least two guys who you would consider, number 2-ish types at worst or better.
And I don't know, and I know people are screaming Brian Bayo at their.
I don't know, but I don't know the Red Sox
right now,
have
but I don't
anyone
agree.
right now. Yeah, I don't think the Red Sox have a guy I would call that yet.
I think Bayo's a terrific number 3 right now on a good team.
And we'll talk about this obviously a lot. I'm sure in talking into the ground in the offseason, but yeah, my ideal setup would have Bayo going into the season as the 3 and Chris Sale as the 4.
Mm-hmm.
And that will require a significant outlay of either prospects, money, or both.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's if looking at the way these teams are built, that's what you have to do. And unfortunately, with the Red Sox don't have those type of prospects coming on the pitching side of the ball. They just don't. And we'll see if things shift and they start drafting pitching earlier, spending more in the international market on pitching. But for now, with what they have in the system, there is not that type of player coming. And so you're going to have to go externally to get it. And I think the importance of it is what we've seen in these playoffs is why you have to have those guys in order to be a successful team late on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, like as much look at how great Nick Pivetta was down the stretch and how, there's a lot to like about what Carter Crawford did. Like you can't have a rotation of 5 number 3 or 4s. You know what I mean? I like the idea of Nick Pivetta or Cutter Crawford being your 5. Okay, cool. Tanner Houck as a 5. All right, like we can keep trying it. I don't know. I'm not in love with it, but like if you want to sell me on it, you probably could. But like the problem is when you have 3 of those guys in the rotation. Like that's the problem they've had is there was too much like if you squint, this could work. And that's not like these are not teams that had rotations that were if you squint, they could work, especially at the top.
Yeah.
So
I just think, it's going to be interesting, but just watching, I've really enjoyed the playoffs. And I think just watching it has got me really thinking about like the Red Sox team next year. And I think there's a lot to build upon and it's just about finding those, those final pieces to the puzzle to get them back into contention.
Agreed.
Fall league.
Red Sox on field, not a whole lot to talk about. There's the only difference like in the Arizona Fall League, the guys we talked about last week are all doing the same thing. Zach Penrod has been really good in 4 starts, 14 Ks and 14 innings. Love to see
walks,
it.
but he doesn't give up any hits either. So
right. I mean, 8 walks and 14 innings. Don't love that. The 4 relievers are kind of all in the same spot. Well,
Wyatt Olds has been pretty good in relief.
That's true. Well, I mean, but it's 3 walks and a hit batter and 8 innings, which for him is phenomenal.
I was about to say that. For him? That's like outstanding. But I just look 3.38 ERA, 1 WHIP, 8 strikeouts in 8 innings. That's pretty good. 179 opponent batting average for him.
It's the best case scenario you could hope for.
That's pretty interesting. Yeah,
for a guy you're trying to fix.
Yeah.
Yeah, for a guy who we left spring training 2022, kind of me personally, especially, like I was kind of really looking forward to see what he did during the
But
year.
we
And then
always
just went
said it was in a
sideways.
relief role.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
so that's the thing. Yeah.
So we'll see if that gets fixed. I mean, Cepeda, Troy, and Mata's numbers are bad, but that's in a small sample. If you have one or two awful games, it's going to be bad the rest of the way. But if you look, Mata in 7 innings, 9 Ks to 2 walks. Troy in 6 innings, 7 Ks to 6 walks. Too many walks. The walks need to come down. But again, I think a lot of those came in that one outing where he didn't get a single out.
Yeah, you had 5 walks in that outing, I believe. And
Cepeda,
for Mata, what I care about is the strikeout to walk. That 9-2 is encouraging.
Well, I want to see the hits allowed come down, but at the same time, it's an environment that is
hitter friendly.
It's very hitter friendly. Cepeda, 3 Ks to 3 walks in 6 innings. I don't love, but again, it's a kind of it's an aggressive assignment for Cepeda, who started the year in low A and finished it in high A for like a month, maybe 2 months. So it is what it is. The hitters, I mean, Hickey is still striking out too much. Bonusy obviously is not there anymore. Rosier is running and not hitting for a ton of power. But that said, Tyler McDonough, who hadn't really been there for long when we did our last episode, in 9 games, he's hitting 333, 425 on base, 515 slugging, 4 steals, 3 caught stealing. So 4 for 7 on stolen base attempts. Don't really love that.
He's getting his reps in.
Getting his reps in, and he's being aggressive, which you like to see. But, he's got a home run. He's got 3 doubles, 11 for 33. So he's been performing really well, after arriving a little late. Like I said, Rosier, 313 average, 403 on base, 388 slugging. So the power's not really been there. And Hickey, it's 17 Ks to 12 walks. The 12 walks really stands out more than the Ks. If you look at the Glendale roster, yes, Hickey has 17 Ks and 44 plate appearances. 44 at bats. But that said, there are 6 guys who have more strikeouts than him. Granted, most of them have far more at bats than him, but they have guys strike out a lot in the Arizona Fall League because you're facing such good pitching, and guys are just airing it out. For even the starters only going 3 or 4 innings. So strikeouts tend to be higher at that level.
I would say it's good to see Tyler McDonough playing well, because I mean, he's one of those guys that's weird. When every time I see him, I like, there are things I like, and I think I always talk about on here. He's switch hitter, he's athletic. I like his swing. He can run, play a bunch of different positions well. And then you look at his his stat line, and it's like, too many strikeouts, not enough contact.
We always have one good debate about him every year of like, should he even be ranked? Should we have him higher?
Right? Whereas I'm always like, I feel like he's just one of those guys that, for whatever reason, his on-field performance, when you see him, doesn't translate to the stat line, if that makes sense.
He's one of those guys that could mess around and have like an 8-year major league career as a utility guy on a bench.
Right. Like if Mauricio Dubon is still hanging around the big leagues,
sure,
I could absolutely see Tyler McDonough having a career like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Because he can go pick it at like 6 positions.
Yeah. And he's a switch hitter. He's got some pop. But it's nice to see him performing well. It was just more that I was getting.
I like the Dubon comp. Meanwhile, internationally, Mexico, Venezuela, and the Dominican Republic winter leagues are all going. The only player who is, as far as we know, under contract for the Red Sox next year that's playing is Emmanuel Valdez, is playing in the Dominican Winter League. Otherwise, it's like, I know I mentioned Rio Gomez the other day. Rio Gomez, I completely forgot, is a minor league free agent, but Rio Gomez is also starting in the Dominican. But Valdez in 7 games, I love his line. It's a little less ridiculous now, Ian, but I don't know how much you're up on Manuel Valdez's line. In 7 games, he's 4 for 21, so he's got a 190 average. He has walked 6 times and been hit by 4 pitches.
Who did he make mad?
Yeah, and the 4 hit by pitches were in like 3 games. We're in like his 2nd, 3rd, and 4th games. So after 4 games, he had like 3 hits. I think the walks, most of them were in the first 4 games, and the 4 hit by pitches. So right now his line is 190, 452, 190.
That's fun.
Yeah, weird small sample size line. I'm interested to see where that winds up. Got yelled at by Alex Spear for not mentioning that Inuri Tavares is on that roster as well. And Engel Beltre is
rightfully so, for the record. That was
the reason I didn't bring it up.
Gross oversight.
Is those lineups always have like 2 or 3, hey, remember that guy names?
Yeah, that's like the whole point of looking
Wendell
at the lineups.
Rio. Like Davy Grion. Sandy Leon is in Venezuela. Like, but it's weird that like there's not a single guy playing so far in Venezuela for the Red Sox. I'm kind of wondering what that's about. Although the thing is that like
Davey Gurriel the one whose nickname was like the Octopus?
the Octopus, yeah, it was like El Pupulo or something.
El
Puyo. I think
Popuyo
I forget what it is in
yeah.
Octopus in Spanish. Come on, Google. I forget. It's Pulpo. El Pulpo.
El Pulpo.
Pulpo. Love it. Loved his, Gotta love these guys that are like a big deal in the winter leagues down there. Yeah, it was like Joey Meneses in Mexico being called Caballo. That was one of my favorites because it only makes sense.
They were ahead of the curve there because
they were.
Joey Meneses wasn't he an all-star? Did he make the all-star team one of these years?
He might have, but if he did, it was because the Nats stink.
Well, that's why. But he's been decent.
I'm a Joey Meneses fantasy owner. He was okay.
No, he didn't make it. I made that up. But okay. Last year 324, 367, 563. This year 275. 321, 401. Not as good, but yeah.
But at any rate, there's not a lot happening. I hope the Red Sox have more guys playing in Puerto Rico, which I think they probably will. They usually do send a few guys to Puerto Rico.
Well, it is interesting
to play for
Caguas. Yeah. It is interesting the lack of participation in the Dominican Winter League because didn't they have a bunch of guys drafted? But I guess they were all for the minor league side of things.
Well, right? That's the thing, because the thing in the Dominican Winter League, you're eligible to be drafted once you hit A ball. So guys like Miguel Blaise got drafted and Alan Castro got drafted. But the thing is, those guys aren't ready to play down there yet. They're just not. Like Castro visited with his team. I think he might have been drafted by Este. So he like visited with them, but like they had photos of him from camp, but like he isn't playing. Gilberto Jimenez should be playing, but I wonder if he like didn't make Los Gigantes because they're the ones whose roster he's on, because he was in camp with them and he's not on their roster. So I'm kind of wondering if he just didn't make it, which is not great. But they have guys who could be playing down there. But they also, I mean, as we know, they said that they were going to have guys around. So I wonder how many of them are like Miguel Blaise, we know, is working out, I think, in Fort Myers. He might be in the Dominican, but he's working out at a Red Sox facility. He has posted social media from a Red Sox facility, I believe. Looking pretty good, frankly. So hopefully getting a good offseason there. But don't forget, there's also like a mandatory dead period. So, I wonder how many guys are going to join teams after the dead period. I'm thinking this through in real time. But there's like a mandatory dead period starting in December, I think. So I wonder if you see guys join teams after that.
It's like December and January, right?
Yeah, I think it's something like that. And then you can bring guys back in February. All right. If we've got nothing else, should we jump to emails, Ian? As we'd like to mention, you can send your emails to podcast@soxprospects.com. We want to talk about what you all want to hear about. Our first question is from Nick, Ian, and Nick asks, I want to step into the way too early and the way back machine. Looking at the minors, it seems like Meyer, Anthony, and Teal will start at AA next year. That makes for a great core. Oh, did we do this up the middle for the Red Sox? Thinking it is hard to find a better collection to start a season at AA or higher. Oh, no, I don't think we did this one. So he's asking for a better collection of guys to start a season at AA or higher. Maybe the Sea Dogs in 2005 with Pedroia, Lester, and Papelbon. Maybe 2015 was Mookie in AA, although Mookie made AA in midseason. No, he started the year in AA. He made high A midseason. Can you remember a better collection of top prospects at AA or higher to start a season? And I think, Ian, the easiest way to think of this is it's 3 top 100 prospects. I can't remember them having 3 top 100 prospects at the same level in some time, because there was a period they didn't have 3 top 100 prospects.
The Greenville team had 3.
2015?
When it had Moncada, Devers,
right.
Benintendi,
so
Espinoza. It had more than 3.
Yeah, they don't both, because it would have been Moncada, Devers,
Espinoza. Was he on that team? I think he was on that team.
No, he joined them late. He didn't start with them. He only pitched 1 game for that team because then he got dealt.
Where's rankings history? I can look at that. There it is.
But the thing is, so the question was AA or higher too. So like,
AA or
maybe
higher,
Greenville, AA or higher. It might be that Pedroia, Papelbon, Lester, Hanley, Sea Dogs team, because it's like in the Sox prospects history, there are basically 2 teams that stand out for how good they were. It's that Portland team. There might have been a Portland team that was later that had I don't know if that was the Brandon Moss George Kateris. Like there were a bunch of like kind of like lower level prospecty types that had major league careers. But it's that team and it's the Greenville team you mentioned. So if you want to say number of top 100 prospects, you have to go back that far, I think. That said, maybe you could find teams that didn't have the high end, but maybe were deeper in terms of number of potential future major leaguers. You know, like when that Greenville team made it up to Portland, and you're talking about guys like Chavis, the Chavises of the world that maybe or maybe not were top 100. You know, Chavis is a fringe top 100 guy.
Oh, Chavis was on that team. That's who I was forgetting.
Oh, that's right.
2015
that's right.
Greenville Drive.
But he was not a top 100 guy because I think the year before.
No, he wasn't at that point. But that's who I was forgetting.
That was the year he was hurt, right?
No. 2015. He played the full year in 2015.
Okay, so it was the year because the year before was the one that he's because he repeated Greenville, and I think it was Devers passed him.
2016 he repeated Greenville.
Yeah. Okay. So 2015 he played most of the season, but it was because he missed the first month of the year with a broken finger or something, and then he broke another finger but tried to play through it and he stopped because of it.
Got it.
And he said after the season, like, yeah, probably it was the same thing that happened this year with Marcelo Meyer of like he got hurt in May and they didn't sit him till August or late July because he tried to play through it. And then he said, yeah, hey guys, this is actually bothering me. So, which is a thing that happens. It's part of learning your body, right? And learning what to play through and what not to play through. But yeah, I think that's kind of what you're looking at. So that's an astute observation. It is one of the, assuming all three of those guys start at the same level, that's going to be one of the best top three cores of a team we've seen. Next question is from John B. He says, a couple of episodes ago, you made a suggestion I liked a lot, a Frankenstein solution next year for second base, basically relying on what we have now and on prospects who might be ready later on in the season. Do you think your Frankenstein approach could also work for openings in the outfield and bullpen too? I ask because my own preference would be for the Red Sox to spend all of their free agent money this offseason on starting pitching. Maybe this is a semantic point, Ian. Let's start with the bullpen. I don't think you need to Frankenstein anything in the bullpen. You've got Jansen Martin at the top. I don't know how much you need in the bullpen beyond that, especially because it depends who you push to the bullpen from the rotation, right? Like if you say you have starters in Bayo, Sale, Crawford, Pivetta, Houck under control next year, if you go and get two guys to the top of the rotation, you're pushing two of those guys to the bullpen. And you're also going to have, in theory, Whitlock in the bullpen all year. I don't think they need a whole lot. I'm not saying they shouldn't look at guys if they become available to be that like number 3 type role, but like I also don't think they have a dire need in the bullpen either.
No, I think the bullpen is in pretty good shape. But yeah. I think that the issue is, and what the emailer is saying, the one problem is you can't do this in too many positions because you just don't have the roster spots for it.
Yep, 100%.
It's just hard to tie up, 2 or 3 positions that you're platooning. And frankly, we saw in the playoffs, that just doesn't really work. It's kind of weird, but that approach works in the regular season. But when you get into the playoffs, you need the star power. You need those higher end position players at pretty much every position. I mean, look at the Rays. The Rays have really struggled in the playoffs the last couple of seasons, and they're one of the teams that does this the most.
Or even if you have a guy who's not a bopper at a position, like a guy who can go get it and maybe run into one.
Yeah, right? I don't love the idea of having multiple positions that you're platooning heading into the season.
Yeah, I mean, look, in the outfield, they need to figure out.
Well,
I would say outfield
/
DH.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's weird because it's when it comes to DH, it's what happens with Turner and
Yoshida by correlation,
proxy,
right?
Right. But I also I was reading some stuff on Yoshida, and I feel like his metrics kind of get skewed because I didn't realize this. Outs above average doesn't take into account the green monster.
Well, right. I mean, the Red Sox left fielder always looks like
I don't think he's as bad defensively as it says, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, but it's also just kind of like that's his reputation. Did he wear down in part because he was playing the field so much because he used to DH in Japan?
I think that is the better argument than his defense sucks. Like he's not a good defender, don't get me wrong, but he's fine. He's in left field and Fenway, you can fake it.
Yeah, but it's like you've also got Jarren Duran. Are you trying to bring Duvall back? What are you doing with Verdugo? Is the outfield a spot where you try and look? Do you try and get in on Juan Soto? Right, which granted is probably going to cost you. I think you try not to do it with Anthony, but
Apparently they only wanted, there was a rumor, and this is, I
No,
don't buy this, the
no,
Christopher Morel thing. It's like,
no,
there's no chance.
stop.
If that happens, every team that didn't make a call should just, like, I don't get
I
that at
mean,
all.
what is that? I mean, is that's I mean, I'm sure Morel has more
No,
team
Morel's
control
like
than
5 years
Verdugo.
left.
Yeah, so I don't. I
It's
mean,
like
is it
Willier
Duran?
Abreu
Is it
or
Duran?
Duran or whatever. Yeah, I mean,
Like
Duran's actually not the worst comparison. They're different types of players, but yeah.
different types of players, and Morel probably has a little bit more track record, only because Duran got
Well, no,
hurt this year.
Morel can hit for power is the
Right,
biggest thing. Morel's going to hit, he'll run into
but
20,
Duran
25
can
home
run.
runs. Yeah.
Duran can run, and he fixed the defense thing. Hopefully, knock
He
on
was,
all the wood.
yeah. Yeah.
Um,
But
anyway, like, yeah,
I mean,
I'm driving Jaron Duran to the airport if the Red Sox can get Soto for his full contract for just Jaron Duran. Come on now.
But I think what I think the whole outfield thing comes down to what they do with Verdugo.
Yeah.
And if you're not going to extend him, I think you have to trade him.
Now's the time to move him. Yep.
Yeah.
No question.
You could get something for him. And I think once that's settled, that'll kind of, the rest will go from there, if that makes sense. I just, second base is one, I don't see them going outside the org to add someone unless it's a higher end option. Cause I just think you look at, if you think Meyer is, a future everyday regular, you don't want to have two guys locked up at those two positions. I know you don't obviously plan for prospects, but I feel like with the elite guys, you kind of have to somewhat make an exception. So, yeah.
Our next, Mark Herman sent us a Rule 5 draft email. I think we'll hit Rule 5 next episode, Ian, just because we're already, I think that's a whole segment, and I don't want to just do that as an email, and we'll try and get back to your email on that, Mark. The next email is from Bob, who has a couple of questions prompted by our anniversary podcast discussions. One, I'm surprised at how much professional scouts are willing to share with you, knowing that you will share those observations with an entire website of people. Are they not concerned about sharing information with competitors? Do they share only what is perceived as conventional wisdom? How open are they with one another? And two, what separates a good amateur scout from a professional? Depth of experience, ability to discern and analyze mechanics, ability to project development. And could a good amateur move directly into the professional ranks? Okay, a couple things here. Maybe let's take the last part first. An amateur scout is not an amateur at scouting.
Yeah.
An amateur scout is a scout who scouts amateurs.
Yeah.
So understood that there's a semantic.
It's two different job titles. Amateur scouts they do the draft basically.
The scouts that the Red Sox hire to scout the minor leagues, and maybe you could I think there's three categories here. Well, there's advanced scouting.
No, there's more than three because there's international scouts too.
Well, I would put international in with a type of amateur scouting, but maybe not. No, because that is different. You're right. You're right.
I think
so. There's different. International scouts who scout international players, which at this point you're mostly referring to the Pacific Rim.
Yeah, because you're still scouting professionals though. Over there.
Because you're scouting professionals over there, but you're also scouting to some degree amateurs, right? If you're going to have the guys,
you also have the guys in Venezuela and the Dominican. Those are
scouts. I think that's what I'm saying. When that's a type of amateur scouting, but it's a specialized type of amateur scouting.
Yeah,
right. Because you're only scouting those areas, and it's a completely different context. Because guys in the U.S. who are amateur scouts are scouting both high school and college, right? And you have a handful of guys in different areas of the world too. Like they've got guys in Europe or different areas of the world as well. Professional scouts, you've got advanced scouts who are scouting major league teams in advance, which is kind of an area that's dying to some degree. Cause a lot of that I don't know that teams do that as heavily anymore. Cause teams don't scout AAA heavily anymore.
No, because a lot of it has been switched to video and analytics.
It's switched to video and analytics. And you figure when you've got the book on a guy, when he's an A-ball from your professional scouts who saw them in A-ball and AA, how much is changing in AAA? I guess I kind of get it. I don't love it.
But I do think that the amateur scouts and pro scouts, they do have different jobs. Amateur scouts, there's a lot more relationship building because you're in the room with the kids.
You're recruiting.
In a sense. Yeah. You have to be, you have to figure out makeup. You have to do that with pro scouting too, but you have to figure out, contract or bonus demands, how committed to certain school are they? There's a lot more, I think, that goes into it in terms of stuff you have to do in preparation for the draft or signing them. that you obviously, if you're a pro scout, you're not doing that because the only way you're getting those guys is via trades most of the time, unless it's obviously it's like a minor league free agent or whatever.
Right.
So, and I think also with like amateur scouts, for example, you have to like build up your network in your area so that, hey, because you need to know, there's no like set schedule that says, hey, these pitchers are pitching this day. Like you need to know via the coaches or via the other amateur scouts in the area that, hey, like this target is pitching in here on this day, this guy's pitching here on this day. Oh, hey, I saw this team and they have this kid that I've never heard of, but he was throwing 92. Like you might want to check him out. Like there's a lot, I think there's a lot that goes into it, that whereas at a pro scout, you're not going to be going to a game, or you're not going to be like asking someone, hey, should I go see this team? Like you have your set teams that you need to see.
You're covering these farm systems or this area
or these orgs. Yeah.
Yeah. It's these orgs where you might like, there's some teams that do it where you cover like 2 or 3 organizations and all of their minor leagues. And maybe like if they have one team that's on the other side of the country, someone picks that affiliate up, right? Like
or you
when
see
the Red
on
Sox,
the road.
Yeah, or no, but I'm saying like when the Red Sox had a team in Lancaster, like I doubt that the pro scout who had the Red Sox was covering Lancaster because you would be flying him across the country to see that one team.
Yeah.
But like there are also some teams where like they have a mid-Atlantic pro scout who covers like the teams in Virginia, Maryland, Delaware.
Or some teams do it by league too. Like they have like a scout who covers the Carolina League, like et cetera.
Exactly. So yeah. Anyway, but yeah, that's teams do it differently, but yeah, it's different. So it's what makes them good. I mean, there's a number. I mean, it's exactly what you think would make them good. It's like, and like you said, there's different skills involved. As far as professional scouts talking to each other, and I will say the media, right? Because it's not like, I think we have developed relationships with folks in the scouting and otherwise professional baseball community is maybe a good way to put it, Ian. It's not a special thing to us. It's not just what teams say to us.
Well, but I also think it's not just special to baseball. It's no different than like a political reporter, getting someone,
it's developing relationships, and it's an exchange of information. And actually, the JP Ricciardi interview that Rob did talks about it. Like, he talks about talking to the media and like, you may get from a guy that like, hey, XYZ information that you may or may not use. Like, it's not a one-way street, and they're not necessarily giving things to you. Teams like that relationship involves stuff that's for public consumption and not for public consumption. I don't think I'm saying anything untoward or like that's every media source in any sports, politics, like, or otherwise, like that's what developing a source is. You share information and not everything is for public consumption.
Correct.
That's part of it. And like scouts like to talk baseball, man. And like, sometimes you're saying something that's like publicly known. Sometimes you don't. And like, like you'll ask a guy like, hey, what do you think about this guy? And they'll tell you, and they might ask us what we think about a guy. On the 20th anniversary episode, we talked about like Chris Mellon talking with a scout for the Rangers who like, saw Roman Mendez at his recommendation. And that was part of why the Rangers traded for him. Right? Like it works both ways. It's a two-way street. Okay. And then the last email we got is the one, thanks for the email, Paul, about, no one mentioning that Cora and Breslow play together. Like I've seen it mentioned. So it's a thing. It's interesting. But like I said, I don't think it's a huge point. I think that's it. Let's button this one up, Ian. We'll next time we'll have a presser with the new CBO. We'll maybe have some inclination on who might be going to play in Puerto Rico because there's nothing happening in the other winter leagues right now. There'll be some movement too. Maybe be some movement. We'll know
because the guys will have to come off of the.
Well, if we wait till 5 days after the World Series, we'll know who the minor league free agent, if anyone got re-signed.
Well, I guess it depends when we do it. Yeah, so we'll see.
I don't think.
Well, when do the guys have to come off the 60 day?
I think it's 5 days after the World Series.
Is it? Yeah.
I think all that tends to happen at once. I guess one thing we should mention really quick, because minor league free agents last year, it was like Emmanuel Valdez was going to be a minor league free agent. So they had to add him early. Looking at the minor league free agents, there's no one there that they're going to add to the 40-man roster. It's just not like, there's just no one it's whether they re-sign anyone to be a minor league free agent is the question.
Yeah.
Re-sign them to be onto a minor league deal ahead of time, which I could see them doing. I could see them doing that with like the Rio Gomez of the world. I could see, Franklin Herman. I would actually be surprised if he's actually going to hit minor league free agency. I bet they signed him to a deal that included next year.
I was about to say, are we sure it wasn't a 2-year deal last year?
Like, well, they signed him late. Like they signed him in like August.
Well, it's
right?
like Penrod got a 2-year deal, so
we know we are right. But it's like sometimes they do that. Like remember, who was the guy they signed from Cincinnati? Jose De Leon.
Yeah,
I would have guessed that he got a 2-year deal, but he didn't. So who knows? Anyway, all right. So nothing really to deal with there, but we'll have plenty to talk about. Of course, send us your emails, podcast@soxprospects.com. Follow us on social media. You can follow Ian on Twitter at Ian Cundall. That's IANCUNDALL. You can follow me at SP Chris Hatfield. You can follow the site on Twitter or X, whatever it is now, and Instagram at Sox Prospects. You can, like I said,
and
email us. Thanks to
Blue
Ludlow
Sky
Thieves.
and Threads too, I believe, right?
We're on Threads, yeah.
And Blue Sky.
Blue Sky. I guess you're on there, and the site's on.
No,
there,
I think
right?
the site is too. Yeah.
Yeah. So at Sox Prospects. I'm not on Blue Sky yet. I did Threads, and I'm just kind of sitting on it. Whatever. It is what it is. Thank you all for supporting us. We want to thank the Ludlow Thieves for our intro and outro music. Oh, we want to thank our Patreon supporters. You can support us at patreon.com/SoxProspects. This episode, we want to thank our newest $5 level contributor, Vincent Villano, as well as Deb Kendall, Wendell Martin, Gerardo Iantosca, Ernest Shermer, Kyle C., Tyler Woodrow, Jeff Trainer, Tim Harding, James O'Hara, and Nathan Kenyon. Thank you all for your support. I think that's about it, Ian. We'll put a pin in it. We'll see you all next episode. Thanks for listening.